What if everything you've ever been taught about kings, queens, and the glory of monarchy was nothing but a mask? What if behind the gold crowns, the holy crosses, and the fairy tales of divine right lies something older, darker, and far more disturbing? This is not just about history, it's about blood. In this video, the 13 demonic bloodlines, the satanic origins of royal families, explained in obsessive detail, we'll peel back the veil and enter a world where thrones are not given by God, but inherited through covenants with shadows. For centuries, whispers have spoken of demonic bloodlines, secret veins of power flowing through kings and emperors, guarded not by armies but by rituals. These are the satanic royal families, the ones who shape nations and wars, not for glory but for sacrifice. And yet, the history books remain silent. Why? Because the truth is too unsettling. Royalty may not be human tradition. It may be the survival of occult royal bloodlines tied to something forbidden. You see, the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. From the Nephilim of Genesis to the pharaohs of Egypt, from the Merovingians of France to the Rothschild dynasty, the same patterns repeat. Blood preserved, secrets hidden, power never lost. This isn't just politics. It's a spiritual architecture that still shapes the modern world. And once you connect the dots, you'll realize the chains of the past are not broken. They're alive, wrapped around us even now. So stay with me, because what you're about to uncover is not simply a theory, it is the forbidden history of the 13 satanic families, a truth too dangerous for monarchies, churches, and elites to ever admit. What if the blood flowing in the veins of kings and queens is not entirely human? Imagine for a moment that their ancestry carries whispers of something older, darker, and forbidden. For centuries, rumors have echoed about demonic bloodlines shaping the destiny of nations, while ordinary people remain blind to the forces pulling the strings. This isn't just folklore. It's a forbidden history buried under layers of crowns, rituals, and carefully crafted myths. When you peel away the official stories, a chilling pattern emerges, a lineage preserved not by chance, but by design. The so-called occult royal bloodlines are not accidents of history. They are engineered currents of power. And behind every coronation and every royal decree, one can almost feel the pulse of something non-human guiding the throne. Now think about this. Why do monarchies cling so fiercely to the idea of pure blood? Why has intermarriage among kings and queens been so consistent, almost obsessive, across centuries? The common explanation is politics or economics. But there's another layer. Many whispers point to the satanic royal families, guarding their sacred blood like a treasure. That blood, they say, is not just biology, but a link to the Nephilim bloodlines, the ancient beings described in Genesis as offspring of gods and humans. If this is true, then the obsession with royal purity is not vanity, it's preservation of a hidden pact, a pact that may still govern the fate of nations today. History books tell us about wars, conquests, and treaties, but rarely do they question what gave these rulers the authority to command entire empires. Could it be that their demonic ancestry of kings granted them more than political legitimacy? Perhaps it offered them an aura, a frequency that ordinary people subconsciously recognized. Think about how peasants once believed simply touching the king could heal diseases. Was it superstition, or the manifestation of the occult power of bloodlines? Modern science dismisses these claims, yet ancient traditions tell us that blood carries more than oxygen. It carries memory, vibration, even contracts written in spirit. Consider how certain dynasties have ruled for centuries without interruption. While empires rose and fell, these families held the reins of power, seemingly untouchable. Coincidence? or the survival of 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, carefully protected by rituals the public was never meant to see. When you notice how many of today's elites trace their roots back to medieval kings, pharaohs, or Mesopotamian rulers, the picture sharpens. This isn't just genealogy, it's the forbidden history of royal families. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Their power was never entirely of this world. Let's not forget how mythology often hides truths in plain sight. Legends of gods mating with humans, of giants ruling the earth, of kings carrying divine essence. These aren't just bedtime stories. They may be distorted memories of the satanic origins of royalty. When pharaohs claimed they were born of gods, were they lying or telling a truth we weren't ready to hear? The idea that rulers are chosen not by votes, but by blood, has been passed down across every culture. It's as if humanity instinctively bows not to charisma, but to an unseen mark within these elite bloodlines explained only through the lens of the occult. I remember speaking once with a historian who laughed at the idea of hidden bloodlines, only to pause when I asked him why so many secret societies obsess over genealogy. Why would Freemasons, Rosicrucians, or the Illuminati care so deeply about tracing family roots if it didn't mean something beyond power and wealth? Their silence says more than words. For them, ancestry is a form of currency, and the satanic covenants of kings are the vault. And if you look closely, you'll see that many coincidences in leadership, presidents related to monarchs, bankers linked to aristocrats, are no coincidence at all. They are threads of the same tapestry. What chills me most is how this knowledge survives not in textbooks, but in whispers, in coded manuscripts, in family archives the public will never read. Imagine living your whole life unaware that your leaders see themselves as heirs, not to humanity, but to an ancient demonic pact. And yet, cracks appear. Researchers, theologians, and even conspiracy theorists have drawn maps linking the 13 satanic families across time and continents. These aren't isolated dots. They form a network, a lattice of control that explains why monarchy still haunts the modern world. But this is just the doorway. Beyond it lies an even older truth, one that traces these veins of power back to the age of giants and pharaohs. When we go back to the earliest layers of human memory, something strange appears. Stories of beings who were neither fully human nor fully divine, yet walked among mortals as rulers. The Nephilim bloodlines described in Genesis weren't simply giants, they were hybrids, a fusion of human flesh and celestial rebellion. Ancient people didn't just imagine their kings as descendants of gods, they were pointing to something darker. These rulers weren't chosen by merit, but by inheritance, bloodlines marked by otherworldly veins. And if kingship began with beings who fell from the heavens, then perhaps monarchy itself has always been a mask for demonic bloodlines. In Mesopotamia, the earliest cradles of civilization, kings often claimed their right to rule came from the stars. The Sumerian tablets tell of gods descending in fiery crafts, mating with humans, and creating dynasties of rulers who carried star-born essence. Pharaohs, too, didn't just rule Egypt, they embodied gods. Yet behind this divinity lies the unsettling possibility that their divine origins were, in truth, the satanic origins of royalty. Inscriptions show them performing rituals that bound their blood to forces beyond the human world. Was it faith, or was it the continuation of occult royal bloodlines whose resonance still echoes through today's elites? Think of the pharaohs who claimed descent from Osiris, the god who was both life-giver and judge of the dead. Were they truly his children, or were they preserving the appearance of legitimacy for satanic royal families whose ancestry stretched back to the Nephilim? The pyramids themselves, with their geometry and astronomical alignment, suggest a civilization guided by more than human intellect. Even the priests whispered that the pharaoh's veins carried an essence not to be mingled with commoners. Perhaps this was why incestuous marriages were so common among the royals, not only to preserve power, but to preserve the occult power of bloodlines tied to beings outside of time. And it wasn't only Egypt. Across cultures, the same theme repeats. In India, the concept of divine kingship bound rulers to celestial ancestry. In Mesoamerica, Mayan and Aztec kings claimed descent from sky gods, often performing blood rituals to maintain that connection. Is it a coincidence that cultures oceans apart echoed the same narrative? Or is this the forbidden history of royal families scattered across the earth like fragments of a single hidden covenant? When viewed through this lens, all thrones begin to look like branches of the same ancient tree, the tree watered by blood and shadow. I once compared these myths with the genealogies of European monarchs. Surprisingly, many lines trace themselves back not only to medieval kings, but to the very pharaohs of Egypt, as if time could not break their claim. Coincidence? Or a deliberate effort to sustain the demonic ancestry of kings that started in Mesopotamia? Even today, some royal families guard artifacts said to hold relics of divine or infernal power, from talismans to ancient manuscripts. These aren't just museum pieces. They are living reminders that power has always been tied to something more than human politics. Think about the biblical phrase, "They were the mighty men of old, men of renown." The Nephilim were not described as saints. They were described as beings who disrupted the natural order. Could it be that their legacy survives not in mythology, but in the elite bloodlines, explained through secret societies and hidden archives? When rulers claim divine right, what they might actually be proclaiming is the continuation of a pact signed long before human laws were written. A pact that ensures their thrones are not seats of governance, but altars of sacrifice. This hidden ancestry also explains why blood sacrifice was central to so many ancient empires. Pharaohs demanded offerings, Mesopotamian kings staged rituals, and Mesoamerican rulers tore hearts from chests, all as if feeding not themselves, but the covenant behind them. It was never about appeasing gods, it was about keeping the satanic covenants of kings alive. And if that covenant survived thousands of years, what makes us believe it ended with the fall of pyramids or ziggurats? Perhaps it simply changed its mask, flowing into medieval crowns and eventually into the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati who still shape our world today. Imagine a monarch, crowned in splendor, yet trembling before an unseen presence in the dark chambers of his palace. Throughout history, whispers tell us that rulers were not only servants of their people, but servants of something far older. The idea of demonic bloodlines isn't only about ancestry, it's about covenants sealed in ritual. Kings, it is said, offered their blood as currency, binding themselves to forces that guaranteed their throne. This wasn't superstition, it was strategy. Power was never free, and the satanic covenants of kings demanded a price paid in blood, secrecy, and allegiance to shadow. Medieval grimoires make subtle references to these rituals, though cloaked in allegory. Alchemists and occultists described kings performing rites under eclipsed moons, their veins opened, their blood offered in exchange for dominion. When we hear of monarchs keeping court magicians, was it mere entertainment or guardianship of forbidden knowledge? Such texts suggest dynasties were secured not only by armies, but by binding themselves to the occult royal bloodlines. Even today, rumors swirl that elite societies continue similar rites in private, rituals designed not for the masses, but for preserving the elite bloodlines, explained through whispers of infernal inheritance. Think of how monarchs were crowned in cathedrals, beneath crosses and prayers. Yet beneath the surface were those coronations also reenactments of older, darker pacts. The blood placed upon the altar may have been symbolic for the people, but literal for the rulers. Some historians dismiss these claims as myth, but myths often hide truths in symbolic language. The demonic ancestry of kings wasn't always hidden in archives. Sometimes it was paraded as divine right, rebranded as sacred legitimacy. The irony is striking. Rituals that chained rulers to shadow were cloaked in the garments of holiness. Even in Europe's high castles, strange stories surface. Kings who spoke of dreams filled with shadowy figures, queens who claimed visions guiding their rule, and royal children who displayed uncanny knowledge beyond their years. Were these blessings or symptoms of a blood pact resonating through their veins? The forbidden history of royal families is laced with accounts of monarchs whose strength seemed superhuman, whose influence exceeded logic. Ordinary citizens believed in miracles, but perhaps what they witnessed was the occult power of bloodlines, kept alive through ancient contracts written in blood rather than ink. One can't ignore how secret societies echo the same themes. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and Illuminati law all contain references to vows, oaths, and blood-binding ceremonies. Are these simply symbolic, or continuations of the same covenant forged by the 13 satanic families? It makes sense why these groups guard genealogies so fiercely. After all, blood is more than DNA. It's resonance, vibration, and invisible signature. When a king signed a treaty with his hand, perhaps the true signature was already carved into his blood, ensuring loyalty not to his people, but to the covenant behind the throne. I once heard an anecdote about a noble family in Eastern Europe who kept a private chapel forbidden to outsiders. Locals whispered it wasn't a chapel at all, but a chamber of ritual, where oaths were renewed under the gaze of symbols no church would dare display. True or not, it mirrors countless stories worldwide. Monarchs bound to altars, offering their lifeblood to seal their reign. What seems like superstition becomes clearer when placed beside the global pattern of satanic royal families. Different cultures, different names, but always the same mechanics. Blood as payment, power as reward. This is the unsettling truth. Kingdoms may have been built on politics and armies, but they were secured by shadows. Blood became the currency of power, and rituals became contracts more binding than any treaty. If kings truly bowed to shadows, then the thrones we admire in history books were altars first and chairs second. And if that pact survived through dynasties, flowing into the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, then it may still pulse in today's world leaders. But this leads us to an even deeper question. If blood itself carries power, what does it mean for entire nations ruled under its vibration? Blood has always been more than biology. In ancient esoteric traditions, it was described as a living current, a vibration that could transmit memory, emotion, and even allegiance to unseen realms. Monarchs knew this well. They weren't just inheriting crowns, they were inheriting resonance. Within the demonic bloodlines, blood acted like a frequency-tuning fork, aligning rulers with the same entities their ancestors once invoked. It's why the satanic royal families guarded their lineage so obsessively. Mixing their blood with outsiders wasn't simply political suicide, it risked breaking the vibration that tied them to the shadow. Think of it like this. Every radio station has its unique frequency, and only when you tune in precisely can you hear its broadcast. Blood works the same way. The occult royal bloodlines were said to broadcast a resonance that allowed them to channel authority from realms beyond the physical. Ordinary people felt this unconsciously, mistaking it for charisma or divine presence. But in truth, they were responding to the occult power of bloodlines. This is why rulers across the ages were seen as sacred, untouchable, even superhuman. They weren't stronger, they were simply vibrating differently. The concept of blood as frequency also explains why royal rituals often involved sacrifice. When kings spilled blood upon the earth, they weren't just making offerings, they were amplifying the signal. Imagine connecting an amplifier to a radio station. Suddenly, the music reaches farther. In the same way, sacrifices allowed satanic covenants of kings to strengthen their pact, resonating across entire nations. This isn't just metaphorical. Many occult texts insist that when the king's blood is bound, the people's spirits unconsciously align under the same frequency. That's how empires were controlled, not only through laws, but through vibration. Have you ever noticed how nations often reflect the personalities of their rulers? When a cruel king ruled, cruelty spread like wildfire among the people. When a paranoid queen reigned, fear haunted the land. Could this be coincidence? Or the invisible pull of their demonic ancestry of kings transmitting an energetic signature into the collective psyche? Some mystics claim it wasn't psychology, it was resonance. The people were tuned to their ruler's blood, unknowingly caught in the field created by the elite bloodlines, explained only in hidden manuscripts. If true, then monarchy wasn't leadership, it was possession on a national scale. I remember reading about the strange practices of the Merovingians, one of the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati. Legends say their hair carried power, that their blood vibrated with an ancient force. This wasn't superstition. It was recognition that certain families carried frequencies that ordinary mortals could not. Cutting their hair was forbidden because it risked breaking the signal. It sounds bizarre to modern ears, but think about how even science admits that DNA emits measurable electromagnetic signals. The ancients didn't need laboratories. They simply felt the weight of this resonance in the presence of their rulers. Even today, echoes of this survive. Consider how world leaders are often described in ways that defy explanation. Some say their presence fills a room with awe. Others feel inexplicably drawn or repelled. Is this charisma? Or is it the lingering resonance of the satanic origins of royalty still humming in their blood? From royal ceremonies to private rituals, blood continues to be central, not as biology, but as frequency. Those within the 13 satanic families are said to cultivate it through rituals, ensuring the vibration never fades, passing the signal generation after generation. This leads to an even darker thought. If blood carries resonance, then it can also carry chains. Imagine entire nations bound not by armies, but by invisible frequencies encoded in their rulers' veins. If the forbidden history of royal families is true, then blood has always been the architecture of control, unseen but unbreakable. And if that's the case, what else could blood transmit? Could it hold not only power but memory, perhaps even entities themselves? If so, the veins of kings may not only rule the world, they may house the architects of thrones waiting to be revealed. Whispers across centuries speak of 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, families whose veins carry not just history, but the pulse of something otherworldly. These aren't random dynasties, they are thrones of darkness, carefully maintained through marriages, rituals, and secrecy. Names like Rothschild, Rockefeller, Merovingian, and Windsor appear again and again, not by coincidence, but by design. The demonic bloodlines they preserve are said to stretch back to the age of Nephilim, linking today's elites with the shadow-born rulers of antiquity. People think wealth and influence explain their power, but those are only the surface. What truly crowns them is the occult power of bloodlines hidden from the masses. Take the Rothschilds, for instance. Known publicly as financial titans, their legacy is often reduced to banking. Yet in hidden corners of history, they are whispered about as one of the 13 satanic families, their fortune serving as camouflage for a covenant much older than capitalism. Or consider the Merovingians, a dynasty shrouded in legend. They claimed descent from mystical beings, their blood said to carry a divine or demonic spark. These weren't mere boasts. Secret archives suggest they believed their veins were tuned to entities who ensured their survival. This isn't just genealogy, it's a contract etched in blood. When you map these families across time, a chilling pattern emerges. Their influence weaves through revolutions, wars, and empires as if history itself bends around them. How is it that the same names appear in different centuries, in different nations, yet always at the heart of power? The answer may lie in the forbidden history of royal families. What we call politics may just be theatre, while the true script is written by blood, and behind the curtain, the satanic covenants of kings keep the actors in place. Monarchies fall, governments shift, but the blood remains enthroned. Even the Windsors, Britain's royal family, aren't exempt from these suspicions. Their ancestry traces back to German aristocracy, and, if you follow the threads far enough, to ancient European dynasties tied to the Merovingians. Critics dismiss this as coincidence, but can so many coincidences exist when bloodlines intermarry with such precision? The obsession with lineage isn't about vanity, it's about resonance. It's the preservation of satanic royal families who see their blood as sacred currency. And the public, unaware, bows at weddings and jubilees, celebrating what may be the survival of occult royal bloodlines. What fascinates me is how these families aren't content with politics alone. Their reach stretches into religion, finance, media, and even secret societies. It's as though every avenue of influence is another throne, another seat in their empire of shadows. The elite bloodlines explained through conspiracy theories may sound outrageous, but when you connect the dots, a design takes shape. They aren't scattered players, they are members of a council, a hidden monarchy above monarchies. And in that council, the 13 satanic families hold their silent court, ruling without ever being elected. Think about how dynastic marriages have shaped the modern world. The Habsburgs intermarried so obsessively that their family tree twisted upon itself. Why risk deformity and weakness unless something far more valuable was at stake? The answer may be that their blood wasn't just blood, it was the signal that tied them to ancient entities. Preserving it was worth any cost. From emperors in Europe to financiers in America, the demonic ancestry of kings has been preserved like sacred fire, passed from one vessel to the next, and the fire still burns. But here's the thought that unsettles me most. If these occult royal bloodlines still sit upon invisible thrones, what power do they wield beyond politics and wealth? Could it be that their blood is not only a key to influence, but also a gate for forces outside of human history? If true, then we are not watching kings and queens at all, we are watching custodians of an ancient pact. And this pact, guarded by the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, may be less about ruling nations and more about sustaining the bond between humanity and the shadows behind the crown. Saturn has always been more than a planet. To the ancients, it was the devourer of time, the dark sun hidden behind the light. In occult traditions, Saturn is not only a celestial body, it is a prison, a seal, a throne of invisible rulers. When you trace the demonic bloodlines through history, Saturn always lurks in the background, like a cosmic overseer ensuring their survival. The cube, the black sun, the endless rings, they all serve as symbols of confinement and control. For the satanic royal families, Saturn wasn't just worship, it was contract, the celestial guarantor of their pact with the shadow. Look at how many emblems of royalty bear Saturnian symbols, crowns shaped like rings, thrones placed beneath domes, and black stones venerated in rituals. Even the cube appears repeatedly, from Mecca's Kaaba to modern financial districts representing the prison of matter and time. To the public, these are cultural coincidences. But within the context of occult royal bloodlines, they are signatures, reminders of the pact that ties their power to the Black Sun. The 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati weren't simply maintaining human thrones, They were ensuring their resonance aligned with the cosmic throne of Saturn itself. Saturn also explains the obsession with cycles. The ancients called it Kronos, father time, the one who devours his children. Rulers tied to the satanic origins of royalty carried this same imprint. Their reigns weren't just political, they were rituals of repetition, endless cycles of war, famine, and rebirth. Nations suffered, people bled, yet dynasties endured. Why? Because the occult power of bloodlines aligned them to Saturn's eternal prison. They ruled not through progress, but through cycles, feeding the cosmic wheel while keeping humanity bound to its rotations. Even architecture betrays this influence. The great cathedrals of Europe, aligned with solstices and equinoxes, carry hidden Saturnian geometry. Thrones are often placed beneath hexagonal domes, echoing Saturn's famous hexagon storm. These aren't aesthetic accidents. They are echoes of a deeper truth, that the satanic covenants of kings weren't just written in blood, but etched in stone. Monuments, palaces, even entire cities became resonators of Saturn's frequency, ensuring the demonic ancestry of kings remained in sync with the black sun above. I recall once visiting a medieval chapel where a black cube sat beneath the altar. Few noticed it, but the priest whispered it symbolized foundation. Foundation of what? For those aware of the forbidden history of royal families, the answer is clear. The foundation of thrones, sustained by cosmic chains. Saturn, the black sun, is the cornerstone upon which monarchies built their legitimacy. Without it, the elite bloodlines explained through occult law would lose their cosmic seal, their guarantee that shadows would keep them enthroned. Consider how modern secret societies still venerate Saturn. The use of the black cube in corporate logos, the presence of Saturnian imagery in world capitals, these are not empty symbols. They are markers of allegiance, quiet acknowledgements that the 13 satanic families remain bound to the devouring god of time. Every coronation, every state ritual beneath black drapery is more than tradition. It is renewal. Renewal of a pact that keeps rulers aligned to the rhythm of the black sun, even if the masses think it's mere pageantry. But here's the question that gnaws at the edges of this mystery. If Saturn is the cosmic seal of royalty, then what happens when that seal breaks? If the occult royal bloodlines draw their strength from this alignment, a disruption could unravel centuries of hidden power. Could it be that the cracks we see today in monarchies, scandals, and dissolving empires are signs that Saturn's grip is loosening? Or are they simply illusions, diversions, while the true throne of the black sun remains untouched, pulsing at the heart of the demonic bloodlines that still rule our world? Throughout history, rulers have worn masks of holiness to conceal their darker inheritance. Pharaohs proclaimed themselves gods incarnate, emperors styled themselves as chosen of heaven, and European monarchs declared divine right as the seal of their reigns. Yet behind these masks lies the demonic ancestry of kings, veiled in symbols of faith. The satanic royal families understood that open claims of infernal lineage would spark rebellion, so they cloaked their origins with crowns, crosses, and sacred rites. Religion became theater, a screen hiding the continuity of occult royal bloodlines whose legitimacy came not from God, but from the shadows. Consider the coronations of Europe, staged in cathedrals under the gaze of saints. To the common eye, these were moments of divine blessing. But to the initiated, they were reenactments of the satanic covenants of kings. The anointing oils, the placing of crowns, the chants, all had parallels in older, darker rituals performed long before Christianity. A crown's circular form echoed Saturn's rings. The cross itself became a mask, covering what some call the satanic origins of royalty. It's no wonder that secret orders whispered, divinity was never divine. It was infernal power dressed in holy robes. In Egypt, the pharaohs wore headdresses shaped like serpents, claiming it symbolized divine wisdom. But serpents, across traditions, are tied to forbidden knowledge. When the pharaoh said, "I am Horus," was it faith, or was it the echo of demonic bloodlines claiming dominion over mortals? In medieval Europe, kings placed relics on their thrones, bones of saints, shards of crosses. Yet some scholars point out that many relics originated in mystery cults, blending pagan and Christian symbols. The forbidden history of royal families suggests these relics weren't protection against darkness, they were camouflage for it. Even today, rulers often present themselves as spiritual leaders. Think of how the British monarch is not only head of state, but head of the Church of England. This blending of throne and altar is no accident. It is tradition inherited from millennia of rulers who needed masks. The occult power of bloodlines required legitimacy in the eyes of the people, and religion was the perfect stage. If a king claimed to be chosen by God, rebellion was sacrilege. Thus, the elite bloodlines explained their dominance not by sword alone, but by divine theater, a theater hiding a demonic script. I remember studying medieval art where halos glowed behind kings' heads, just like saints. But why grant monarchs such sacred imagery? The Church said it was to honor their divine right, but one cannot ignore how halos mirror the black sun of Saturn, the seal of the 13 satanic families. Art wasn't just decoration, it was propaganda, ensuring the masses saw rulers as holy. Yet behind that glow, bloodlines whispered of their true inheritance. The demonic bloodlines never needed public acknowledgement, they only needed belief, and symbols provided it. Masks of divinity also appear in myth. Heroes who slay monsters often turn out to be kings themselves, crowned as saviors. Yet what if these myths aren't about victory, but about rewriting history? To hide that kings didn't slay monsters, they descended from them. By recasting their infernal ancestry as divine, rulers reframed satanic royal families as chosen ones. The strategy was brilliant. Who would dare question a ruler presented as God's reflection? This mask didn't just hide bloodlines, it protected them for centuries, even as empires fell. But masks eventually slip. Scandals, betrayals, and secrets erode the divine image. And when the mask cracks, the people glimpse what lies beneath, a throne not of light, but of shadow. If crowns and crosses are disguises, then what truth do they conceal about the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati? Could it be that every symbol of divinity was always a veil, woven to hide the infernal veins that shape our world? And if that's the case, what happens when the veil finally tears, exposing the true faces behind the crowns? Every covenant has a price, and the satanic covenants of kings were no different. When monarchs bound themselves to the shadows, they secured power, but at the cost of their nations. History reveals the pattern: plagues, endless wars, and rivers of blood. These weren't accidents of poor leadership, they were the sacrificial currency demanded by the pact. The demonic bloodlines ruled, but their thrones were drenched in suffering. For the common people, it meant living as offerings, pawns in a game whose rules they could never see. For the rulers, it meant feeding the bond that kept their crowns secure. Consider how entire civilizations collapsed after golden ages of monarchy. Egypt, Babylon, Rome, all empires ruled by occult royal bloodlines that shone brightly before crumbling into ruin. Scholars explain this as the natural cycle of history. But what if it was something more? What if these collapses were orchestrated sacrifices, offerings to sustain the blood pact? The fall of a kingdom could be seen not as failure, but as ritual completion. In this view, wars weren't simply politics, they were offerings. The satanic royal families survived while nations fell, showing us who truly benefited from the bloodshed. Think of the Black Death in Europe. While millions perished, royal dynasties managed to endure, their wealth and power intact. Was this resilience or evidence that the 13 satanic families thrived where others suffered? Blood sacrifice need not be performed on altars. It can unfold across continents. Wars, plagues, famines, all serve the same purpose: feeding the pact. If the occult power of bloodlines demands sacrifice, then history itself becomes a ritual, repeating over and over, with humanity unknowingly playing the role of the lamb. I once heard a historian say, "Nations rise on sacrifice." He meant patriotism, but the statement carries a deeper, darker resonance. The forbidden history of royal families suggests that entire societies were designed as offerings, their collective energy funneled into the covenant. Every battle lost, every child starved, every life broken. These were not failures, but ingredients of the ritual. And the rulers, smiling behind crowns and crosses, were not victims of history. They were priests of it, ensuring the altar of power was never empty. Notice how blood sacrifice appears in countless traditions. Aztec temples, Druid groves, even medieval Europe with its witch burnings, all carried echoes of offering blood to something unseen. Yet the beneficiaries were always the rulers, the demonic ancestry of kings. They understood that the act of sacrifice amplified their resonance, keeping the elite bloodlines explained in esoteric lore alive and empowered. The more the people bled, the stronger the pact grew. And the more the pact grew, the longer the thrones endured. Even in modern times, sacrifice hasn't vanished, it has transformed. Wars launched under false pretenses, economies collapsing overnight, pandemics that spread like wildfire. All of these drain the blood of nations while rulers remain untouched. Ordinary people lose everything, while the satanic origins of royalty continue without disruption. The form has changed, but the essence remains the same: sacrifice as sustenance for thrones of shadow. When you begin to see history this way, events no longer look random, they look ritualistic. But if kingdoms are built on sacrifice, what happens when the offering is no longer enough? What if the entities behind the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati demand more than wars and plagues? Could that explain why our world grows increasingly chaotic? Why crises multiply instead of fading? If the pact requires constant feeding, then perhaps what we're living through today is not random turmoil at all, but the latest chapter in a blood ritual as old as kingship itself. And that ritual, as we'll soon see, may point to the very entities hiding behind the thrones. Behind every throne, legends whisper of advisors who were never seen, yet always obeyed. These weren't mere counselors, they were entities, ancient forces shaping destiny from the shadows. The demonic bloodlines did not emerge by chance. They were engineered by beings who stood outside human history. Baal, Asmodeus, Astaroth, names that echo through grimoires, are more than myth. They are architects, each one leaving fingerprints on dynasties that still shape our world. When kings bowed to shadows, it was not metaphor. They were literally bending the knee to the unseen rulers of their blood. Take Baal, for instance. Described as the first king of hell, he was said to grant power, invisibility, and command. Imagine what a medieval monarch would give for such gifts. Dynasties tied to Baal claimed victories against impossible odds, their enemies routed by what seemed like supernatural advantage. These weren't coincidences. They were signs of the occult royal bloodlines, drawing on powers beyond the battlefield. To the peasants, it was divine favor. But to those initiated, it was Baal's signature on the throne, his mark pulsing in the veins of rulers who carried the satanic covenants of kings. Asmodeus, the demon of lust and corruption, surfaces repeatedly in the forbidden history of royal families. He wasn't simply a tempter, he was an engineer of dynastic decay and expansion alike. Monarchs tied to his resonance often plunged their courts into decadence, yet their influence only grew. Was this weakness or strategy? Through Asmodeus, the satanic royal families learned to rule not just by fear, but by desire. Kingdoms weren't conquered by armies, they were seduced into submission. This subtle form of domination ensured the bloodlines didn't merely survive, they thrived, cloaked in luxury while draining nations of their spirit. Astaroth, often depicted as a fallen angel of knowledge, guided rulers into systems of control so advanced that they still echo in today's world. Bureaucracy, secret councils, centralized authority, all were tools said to be seeded by his hand. Through Astaroth, the elite bloodlines explained their dominance not with brute force, but with structure. Kingdoms became machines, efficient and obedient, their rulers elevated not as men, but as instruments of an infernal design. If Baal gave them victory, and Asmodeus gave them desire, Astaroth gave them the architecture of empires that would endure for centuries. I once read a passage from a forgotten grimoire that claimed demons do not serve kings, kings serve demons. It explained that rulers were vessels, chosen for their blood resonance, aligned to specific entities who used them as extensions of their will. This reframes the idea of the demonic ancestry of kings. They weren't just descendants of Nephilim, they were carriers, living temples for infernal beings who shaped laws, wars, and rituals. The thrones of history, when seen through this lens, were altars disguised as seats of governance. And humanity, unknowingly, bowed to the entities enthroned behind the veil. Even secret societies acknowledge this. Initiates are told that kings and emperors often had invisible patrons, entities consulted before every major decision. Some called them spirits, others called them angels, but their true nature was hidden. The satanic origins of royalty were sanitized for the public, presented as divine right or heavenly blessing. Yet in truth, these were infernal alliances, bonds with demons who ensured the 13 satanic families never lost their grip. To admit this openly would have shattered the illusion of holiness. So the entities remained unnamed, their influence disguised as fate, destiny, or divine providence. But if these entities are the true architects of power, what does that mean for the world today? Do Baal, Asmodeus, and Astaroth still whisper into the ears of presidents, monarchs, and financiers? Or have they been replaced by others, darker and more cunning? If the occult power of bloodlines is still sustained by their presence, then the rulers of the modern world may not be leaders at all, they may be vessels. And if humanity has lived for millennia under the will of demons, then perhaps the final question is not whether kings are chosen by blood, but whether the blood itself was chosen by something far older than humanity. If rulers throughout history have carried the demonic bloodlines, then the final and most unsettling question is, what about us? If the satanic royal families have shaped nations, waged wars, and bound humanity through blood, what does that make of those who live under their reign? Perhaps we are not simply subjects of monarchies, but prisoners of veins, caught in a web spun long before our birth. The occult royal bloodlines may sit on thrones, but their resonance flows downward, binding entire populations to their frequency. The crown may rest on one head, yet its shadow stretches over all. Think of the symbolism of blood in every culture. From baptism to communion, from sacrifices to oaths, blood has always been the ultimate seal. Humanity has always felt its power, even if it didn't fully understand why. If the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati have guarded their veins for centuries, then perhaps what they are really preserving is not their power alone, but the chain that keeps humanity tethered to unseen masters. The forbidden history of royal families is not just about elites, it's about everyone who unknowingly walks beneath their shadow. There's a haunting thought: what if we carry fragments of that same resonance? Across generations, bloodlines intertwine, and ordinary people may hold echoes of the demonic ancestry of kings. This doesn't mean thrones await them. It means they may carry vibrations that bind them subconsciously. Have you ever wondered why certain families seem cursed? Why patterns of suffering or power repeat? It may not just be psychology, it may be the whisper of the occult power of bloodlines reverberating silently through veins. Even in modern times, blood rules more than we admit. From DNA tests linking celebrities to monarchs, to genealogies that reveal presidents connected to medieval kings, the pattern refuses to vanish. Leaders today often trace ancestry back to Europe's ancient thrones, as if the satanic covenants of kings still dictate who rises and who does not. And if we look closely, we see that this isn't democracy at all. It's the continuation of an ancient pact. The persistence of satanic origins of royalty hidden beneath the veneer of modern politics. I remember a conversation with a genealogist who admitted, almost sheepishly, that most US presidents share kinship with European monarchs. He said it as a curiosity, but to me, it sounded like confirmation. The elite bloodlines explained in esoteric traditions are alive and well. Nations may claim independence, yet their rulers' veins betray them, pulling them back into the orbit of the 13 satanic families. In this light, sovereignty is illusion, and blood is the invisible leash that leads humanity where it must go. But perhaps the most provocative idea is that blood doesn't only bind rulers to demons, it binds us to them as well. If kings are vessels, then subjects are tributaries, channels feeding into the same river. The suffering of nations, the wars of generations, the sacrifices of millions, all become energy flowing back to the thrones. And if that's true, then the demonic bloodlines don't just rule, they feed. And we are the feast, unaware that the banquet has lasted for millennia. So here is the closing initiation. If the rulers of the world are bound by demonic veins, what does that make of us? Are we free individuals, or fragments of a greater offering? Do we worship crowns or bleed for them? And if the occult royal bloodlines are indeed the architects of our past and present, what role will they play in the future? Perhaps the thrones of darkness are not relics of ancient times, but living structures shaping what is to come. The blood that binds kings may be the same blood that binds us all. And the question now is whether the chain can ever be broken. So now that you've seen the threads woven through history, the demonic bloodlines, the satanic royal families, the occult power of bloodlines shaping empires and binding nations, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you close this video and return to the comfort of official history? Or will you allow yourself to question everything you thought you knew about power? The truth is unsettling, yes, but ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. If the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati are more than legend, then their influence still pulses today, silently guiding politics, religion, and culture. Which raises the real challenge: how much of your life is truly yours, and how much has been shaped by chains you never saw? Are you ready to free yourself from the illusions built to keep you docile? Think about it. Every war, every plague, every rise and fall of kingdoms. What if these weren't random events, but rituals feeding a pact that still binds the world? If kings and queens bowed to shadows, what does that say about the people who followed them without question? And more importantly, what about us today? Are we any different? Or are we still bleeding for thrones we'll never sit upon? The real initiation is not about them, it's about you. What will you do now that you know this? Will you seek, question, uncover? Or will you remain in the story they wrote for you? If this knowledge stirred something in you, if you feel the pull to go deeper, then don't walk away. Subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and stay with us, because this is only the beginning. There are more truths hidden in shadows, waiting to be unveiled, and together we'll uncover them, one veil at a time.